I saw my newborn brother getting swapped and did nothing. Last time, I tried to save him and ended up disfigured by the attacker. My brother fell for the poor student our family helped out. He ran me over so she could have the only free college spot. Don't blame me, sis. Too bad you wouldn't give up the spot for Linda. He sneered at me, calling me ugly and saying I deserved my scars. In this new life, I just watched as my brother got exchanged. I was woken by a baby's cries. As soon as I opened my eyes, I saw I was in the hospital, next to my mom who had just given birth to my brother. Everything seemed like that fateful day, so I glanced towards the crying baby. Sure enough, I spotted a man slipping my brother's gold bracelet onto his own kid's wrist. His rough handling made my brother cry louder. Annoyed, he slapped my brother unconscious. Sensing something, he looked my way, but I quickly pretended to be asleep. Back then, I, a mere 3-year-old, clung to the man's leg to stop him. He kicked me hard into a wall, breaking several bones. I yelled for help until a nurse finally came. Angry at me for ruining his plan, the man slashed my face. You ruined my kid's future, and now yours is gone, he taunted. My face was left scarred, and I had a long recovery. I started first grade with my brother at 9. School was cruel. I was bullied for my appearance. Even my family looked at me with disdain, like I embarrassed them. I focused hard on my studies, dreaming of escaping to a good college and life away from them. But in senior year, just after earning the top spot for the free college ticket, my brother killed me for the poor student he loved. His parting words were furious. This is your fault for being selfish, sis. The scars I bore were from saving him. Unbelievably, my parents never blamed him, even helped cover up the crime. I swore then, if given another chance, I'd let my brother's fate unfold untouched. Now, having heard the man's footsteps leave with my brother, I stayed quiet. My mom awoke soon after, asking about my brother's cries. I played innocent, saying I heard nothing. She seemed unsure but let it go. A week later, my mom and our replacement brother, Ken, left the hospital. I went to kindergarten, where life was surprisingly nice with no bullying or odd looks. I finally found calm. 10 years passed quickly, bringing us to a family fair. Someone bumped into us, stealing Ken's phone. I instantly knew it was my real brother. Unlike before, he was now dark-skinned, skinny, dirt-covered and limping, clearly not well off. In the past life, he'd looked down on me, saying if he'd been raised by criminals he'd still thrive. Seeing him now, I realized he was doing all right. My parents were about to chase him, but I faked a fall to distract them. They wouldn't suspect anything bad of me since I wasn't disfigured and was a good student. They stopped the chase, tending to me. I watched my real brother fade into the crowd and felt relieved. His final sneer came to mind. Good riddance, you ugly freak. Ken, furious at losing his phone, cursed the thief, wishing revenge. I knew the world was too small for me not to act. As we walked, Ken suddenly pointed out the thief. Even my parents didn't notice, so I followed Ken into an alley. My brother cursed as Ken caught him. Rich people like you can't afford to lose a wallet? My brother spat. Ken, unfazed, argued back. Just cause we're rich doesn't mean we're idiots for you to rob. My brother, with typical audacity, gave back the wallet, expecting release because he was still a minor. Ken, ever assertive, was not one to let this slide, just like his dad, with more love for fighting than learning. He kicked my brother against the wall. What a coincidence, I'm underage too. As long as I don't kill you, the cops won't do much to me. That's when my brother started freaking out. I just watched cold as ice. Just like in my past life, when he let those classmates bully me. As Ken was about to hit him again, a little girl suddenly ran over and stood in front of my brother. Don't hit him, David's dad is seriously ill. He's got no choice, that's why he stole your money. What a blatant lie. David's dad was never seriously ill. When I saw the girl's face, I furrowed my brows a little. Isn't that interesting? I know this girl too. In my past life, she was Linda, the poor student my brother was obsessed with. She also indirectly caused my death. It's not surprising she's here. In that other life, Linda and my now fake brother Ken grew up together. Now David and Ken's roles have switched. My cheap little brother is now David, and naturally Linda's childhood buddy. Right now, Linda's eyes are filled with tears as she looks pitifully at Ken. I'll make David return your phone. Just let him go, please. Ken's a troublemaker, never listened to anyone. But seeing Linda cry softened him up. Alright, stop crying. I'm not that unreasonable. For a moment, it felt like I was back in my past life. After I got the admission spot, Linda cried to David just like that. David was a little thug, and seeing her cry made him furious. He got a bunch of guys to humiliate me. Said it was to teach me a lesson, so I wouldn't covet what wasn't mine. I fought with all I had, but those dirty hands wouldn't leave me alone. Until they pulled off my mask and saw my face. Then they cursed and stopped. What an ugly freak. I wouldn't take her even if she was free. Damn, seeing that face makes me sick. It was because of this face that I escaped that disaster. When I got home, I showered for 4 hours straight. Not until my skin was raw did I stop. Then I broke down, crying in the tub. I thought it was all over. But later, the nightmares came every night. Every time I closed my eyes, I relived that day. Ugly faces, disgusting smells, and slimy hands like snakes. Every time I saw a man on the street, I couldn't help but shiver and vomit. I realized this would never be over. It was utterly disgusting. A cold breeze brought me back, and I shuddered. Ken noticed my pale face and casually asked, "Sis, you okay?" I glanced at him, pushed down my disgust, and was about to say nothing was wrong. Suddenly, Linda grabbed my sleeve and knelt in front of me. "Sister, are you unwilling to let David go? Please let him off. Look at how pitiful he is." I gave her a long look. She really always liked painting herself as the victim, using it to morally coerce others. Ken also urged, "Sis, just let it go." I said calmly, "I won't hold it against a kid. But I do want to see his mom." I needed to remind his mom to educate him properly. He's just a thief now. Who knows what he'll do if he continues like this? When I mentioned seeing his mom, even my fearless brother showed a hint of fear in his eyes. I soon met my brother's current mom, Becky. She was a stout middle-aged woman who seemed flustered seeing Ken and me. It's evident she knew about the swap back then. She glanced behind us, relaxed a bit after seeing no one else. "What are you doing here?" After I explained myself, she visibly relaxed. "Don't worry, I'll keep my son in line." The moment she finished, my brother flinched. I nodded meaningfully. "This time, your son's lucky he encountered me and my brother. Had my parents caught him, they wouldn't have been so kind." Becky's face darkened as if she remembered something. "Got it, I'll watch him. He won't be making us lose face outside again." She gave my brother a shove into the room, locking the door behind him. "You stay put in there and don't cause trouble." After that, she turned to Ken with a flattering smile. "Young man, do you want to come inside? I just bought some fruit, and there are candies." Ken gave a face of disgust. "No way, looks dirty in there." With that, he turned to leave. Becky started to follow, but restrained herself. She went inside instead. In no time, I could hear my brother crying and howling from inside. Becky was taking out her anger over Ken's disdain on him. After leaving the alley, Linda waved at us with a sweet, harmless smile. "Bye, pretty sister and brother." Pretty sister, huh? That's a strange title coming from Linda. When my brother hit me with his car, she was sitting in the passenger seat. As I lay dying, she stepped out and whispered the last words I ever heard from her. "Ugly freak. You deserve everything coming to you. Ignore David's warning and just die." In the present, as Ken saw Linda waving, he suddenly turned like he wanted to say something to her. I grabbed his hand. "Come on, let's get going. Mom and Dad will worry if we're gone too long." In just a few minutes, Ken had caught feelings for Linda. If they kept in contact, who knows what he'd do for her in the future. I can't let history repeat itself. Ken had no choice but to follow me. So he didn't see Linda's face turn cold after we turned away, losing all that innocent bunny look. After that, I never saw my brother again. I guess Becky took my words to heart. With effort, I once again secured the spot at my dream school. This time, no one got in the way, and I smoothly got into college. My parents even threw me a graduation party. At the party, with friends and family showering me with praise, my parents couldn't hide their pride. But when Ken's name came up, their expressions soured. Ken's grades were terrible, and he was always causing trouble. Over the years, they tried everything, yelling, hiring tutors, but he never changed. It's in his genes, honestly. Ken's biological father, John, was just the same. My dad doesn't know the full story. He comforts himself by thinking, Ken takes after me. He'll bloom later and find success. My mom chimes in, that's right, Lucy. Don't look down on your brother and make him feel bad. I nod, promising I wouldn't. I recall a past life incident where my brother called me ugly and unlovable. My parents ignored my feelings, praising him for his rhyming insults at such a young age. They even told me to stay away, so he wouldn't have nightmares from seeing my face. It's so unfair. Fortunately, Ken's behavior was so bad that my parents decided to teach me about the family business. They know full well that if Ken took over, he'd run it into the ground, so it's better left to me. I treat Ken well, and always step in when they scold him. I figure even when my parents aren't around anymore, I'll look out for Ken. That's truly what I hope for. Coming back in time, I now understand that to avoid being bullied, I need to be strong and seize every opportunity to grow. I thought life would stay calm, but I didn't expect Becky to bring my brother over one day. It all started on Ken's third day of high school. He got into a fight and ended up with a bloody head. The other student was David, oddly enough. The home helper shared this news with me. Becky had personally brought him over to apologize, almost beating David unconscious to get my parents' forgiveness, but they refused to see them. She asked if I wanted to talk to Becky. At first, I thought I misheard and asked her to confirm. Auntie, what was the other student's name? David, she said, and I heard his dad's a wanted killer. Like father, like son, I guess he's a thug, and David's a little thug too. I became more certain that my biological brother had come along. Back then, John wanted to switch my brother with his son, because he had just killed someone. He hoped that after he got caught, someone would take good care of his newborn, and his mind turned wicked. I never thought John would evade capture for so long, and Becky going mad, and bringing my brother here was wholly unexpected. My brother looks just like my dad, so upon seeing him, my parents would realize their child had been swapped. Could Becky be having a change of heart, wanting to switch them back? No, if she really had a change of heart, she wouldn't have beaten David so badly. To figure out what Becky's up to, I decided to meet her and my brother, who I hadn't seen in years. I planned to meet them without alerting my parents, and send them away discreetly. But as I went downstairs, I ran into my parents. My dad spotted me immediately and said, Lucy, you're just in time. We're about to meet the punk who bullied your brother. I won't let him treat Ken like that. My mom added angrily, yeah, let's see what kind of kid would do that. Seems like my parents were destined to meet their biological son today. I quickly composed myself, let's go. I was no longer the helpless lamb from before. Even if my brother returned home, he couldn't hurt me as he had in the past. When I saw my brother, I finally understood why Becky dared bring him to my parents. He was disfigured. His face was scarred as if someone had poured hot oil on it, almost unrecognizable. It's evident Becky did this. At that moment, he was beaten on the ground by Becky, covered in blood, glaring at us like a vengeful ghost from hell. My mom involuntarily stepped back, clutching her chest and saying, what a fright! This ugly sight startled me. I shouldn't have come down, I'll have nightmares. My brother, visibly shaken, yelled in rage, shut up. I wasn't ugly before. My mom poured hot oil on me. That's why I look like this. Why does everyone look at me like I'm trash? Just because I'm ugly, does it mean I don't deserve to live? I coldly stared at him, recalling his last words in the previous life. You ugly thing, you deserve to be disfigured. Your actions earned your suffering. Now he was facing the same fate. All the scorn that once fell on me was now his to bear. Is this karma? Becky, facing my brother's accusation, dismissed him. I didn't mean it. You're so unforgiving for a child. She then turned to greet my parents with a smile. I heard David hit your precious kid. I'm here to apologize and taught him a hard lesson. I hope you can forgive him. She offered 2 boxes of supplements, continuing, I heard your son's still in the hospital. I worry about him. Can I visit him? So that's her motive. Becky was worried about her son, which is why she took the risk of bringing my brother over. Once she finished speaking, my brother countered, I did nothing wrong. He called me ugly and tried to steal my Linda. He deserved it. Becky smacked him on the head. Enough already. Are you done? Ken is Ken, the golden boy, born with a silver spoon. You're not even worthy of shining his shoes. So what's the big deal about him insulting you? My brother looked disappointed. Are you even my mom? Always defending others. Ken's the kind of loser who's just born lucky. Do you really need to kiss up to him? Unlike me, who got into an elite school through excellent grades, with a generous scholarship to boot. Before he could finish, Becky hit him again. Shut up. What do your grades matter? Ken's going to be a big boss one day while you'll be working for him. My brother snorted. He's hopeless. I heard his sister's the one inheriting, not him. Becky's expression changed instantly. She looked to my parents. Is that true? My dad with a cold face replied, that's our business, not yours. Becky tried to laugh it off. Listen, daughters marry out. They're outsiders in the end. The inheritance should go to the son. When she found out the inheritance was set for me, she was desperate, constantly persuading my parents to change their minds. My parents were fed up. Our inheritance, we'll give it to whomever we choose. Not your business. Now leave. Seeing David so disciplined by Becky, they dropped the idea of getting back at Ken. In the end, my parents kicked Becky out. She never got to see Ken. But I knew it wasn't over. I caught Becky's hateful glance as she left, probably thinking I stole the company that should be Ken's. In this lifetime, I'm extra careful, immediately hiring 2 bodyguards, a man and a woman, to follow me everywhere. Once that was sorted, I went to the hospital to see Ken. Along the way, I felt like someone was watching. I turned around but saw no one suspicious. Yet, I had my guesses about the stalker. At the hospital, I found Linda feeding Ken some porridge. I raised an eyebrow. What a twist of fate. The same people from my past life are back together like this. Linda stood nervously. Hello, sister. Ken noticed my indifferent look and patted Linda's hand to reassure her. Sis, this is Linda, my girlfriend. I nodded. Linda, could you step out? I need to talk to my brother. Okay, take your time. Linda forced a small smile, looked a bit down, as if I'd bullied her. Once she was gone, Ken was a bit annoyed. Sis, do you have a problem with Linda? She's great and driven, but lots of girls bully her and take her scholarships. Scholarships? Aren't those for good students? Can they really be snatched away? Ken shrugged. Sure, but in our elite school, nobody needs money. Why take scholarships on purpose? Well, same as my clueless brother from my past life. I didn't press the issue. Instead, I sliced an apple for Ken. These days, be careful. Ken was puzzled. Sis, why should I be careful? Other than David, who seems at odds with me. I heard Becky beat David half to death. He can't bother me now. I toyed with the fruit knife. When I got to the hospital, I saw someone sneaking around your room. As I got closer, he ran off. He was wearing a baseball cap, couldn't see the face, but he had a mole on his lip. Did you know David's dad, John, is a wanted killer? He also has a mole on his lip. Damn, is he going to avenge David? Ken finally got nervous. Though usually reckless, he only picks fights he can win. Overall, he values his life. I glanced at him, slowly saying, I've got a way to fix this once and for all. Ken perked up. Sis, tell me. 10 minutes later, Ken called David. Sounding weak. David, I maybe don't have long. I owe you an apology for what I did. It was too much. You were right to fight back. Becky quickly grabbed the phone. Ken, why were you talking about dying? My sister heard our parents change their minds and left the inheritance to me. Suddenly, she brought 2 bodyguards and stormed my room. He coughed violently, like coughing up blood. I got stabbed a few times, hiding in the bathroom. If her guards break in, I'll be dead. As he finished, Becky heard loud banging on the door. Becky panicked. Hang in there. I'll call your dad. She rushed to a bathroom, dialing a long-neglected number. She didn't notice David's face change, his fists clenching, nails digging into his palms. In just 5 minutes, the tightly shut hospital room door was kicked open from outside. The intruder was surprised to see Ken resting normally in bed, then tried to flee. But it was too late, as my bodyguard swiftly tackled him to the ground. His hands were pinned back, held down, completely helpless. I walked over, pulled off his baseball cap. I was right, the stalker was John. Becky realized the inheritance would go to me and panicked, plotting for John to kill me. Ken, seeing John's face, laughed. Sis, you nailed it. Becky really sent John to save me for redemption. Was this your plan? John's eyes burned with rage, looking like he'd tear me apart. He struggled violently, but was overpowered by my bodyguards. Sure. After admitting it, I gave him a few hard kicks to the face and body. He's got the nerve to show up, he might as well just drop dead. When I saw his face bleeding and realized I had broken a few bones, I stopped. In my last life, he wrecked my life just to ensure a better one for his biological son. This time, I'm gonna make sure his own son puts him in jail. John asked, how do you know I'd show up? I heard from others that David's dad is a fugitive for murder. I looked you up online too, so I know what you look like. I noticed you when I came to the hospital, and saw you followed me. I figured you wanted to find out which room my brother was in, maybe to thrash him a little. I paused, then continued. But I bet if you knew Ken was about to get killed, you'd want to save him. That way, even if you get busted, you'd get some credit, and maybe a lighter sentence. You'd be free sooner to live a normal life. As if. I was just sure that John knew Ken was in danger, and would take a risk to save him. As for the lie Ken told over the phone, I wasn't worried about Becky figuring it out. Becky's just convinced I'm gonna steal Ken's inheritance, which is why she sent John after me. So, me sending someone after Ken for the money just makes sense. Ken got out of bed and kicked John in the head, grinding his face into the ground. Idiot. With brains like yours, you think you can avenge David? Maybe in the next life. Do you even know? John glanced at me, biting back the words he was about to say. Know what? That you're gonna spend your life in prison? John was furious and started yelling. Ken jumped. Are you nuts or something? It wasn't long before the cops took John away. Before leaving, John warned Ken, you'll regret this. Ken punched him. You're still threatening me? Enjoy prison. Afterward, Becky called. You bastard. Do you know what you've done? Ken chuckled. Yeah, by the book, caught a criminal. Stop calling me. Dealing with someone as broke as you is bad luck. Ken hung up before Becky could respond. A week later, Ken got out of the hospital. Coincidentally, it was his birthday, and my parents threw him a big party to chase away the bad luck. Many of Ken's classmates came. I even spotted David. Ken frowned when he saw David. Why were you here? Didn't invite you. Here for your dad. 2 bodyguards stepped in protectively. Not at all. A criminal like him belongs behind bars. So you did everyone a favor. David's eyes flickered with malice and a hint of satisfaction. Ken was skeptical. Then why were you here? To celebrate your birthday. Everyone's here. Didn't want to be an outcast. David pulled out a gift he had prepared. Ken tossed it aside. Fine. Might as well see the gap between us. Don't overestimate yourself, and try taking Linda from me. Hands clenched at his side, David forced a smile. I'll be watching. He lowered his gaze, hiding the storm within. Soon Linda arrived. Seeing her, Ken happily went over, forgetting about David. Linda still had that timid demeanor. Hi, sister. I nodded slightly, my demeanor indifferent. Turning to an aunt by my side, I said, keep an eye on David. As I left, I heard Linda whisper to Ken, does your sister not like me? No way. Don't be sensitive. I'm telling you, my sister treats me well. She'll like my girlfriend too. Ken took a sip of champagne. When my folks hand the business over to her, we won't have anything to worry about. Linda was surprised. Why won't they give it to you, their son? Just not cut out for business. If it was up to me, I'd run it into the ground. Better to let my sister handle it. Linda tightened her grip on her glass. Her fingers turned slightly white, her displeasure evident in her dark eyes. She watched me leave and then looked at Ken, who brought her a piece of cake, biting her lip. An hour later, after mingling with my parents' business partners, I was ready to head upstairs. At the turn of the stairs, I ran into Linda. Something you need? Linda stared at me. Have I done something to offend you? It feels like you don't like me. That's right, I don't. So keep your distance. What? Linda was briefly stunned, surprised I would admit it so openly. Recovering, she suddenly smiled. You'll regret that. The next second she stepped back. Sister, don't. With a sharp scream, Linda fell down the stairs. Ken rushed over first. Linda, are you okay? Cradling Linda, Ken's face was filled with concern. I'm fine. Linda whimpered, her eyes red and teary, looking the picture of innocence. Don't blame your sister. She didn't mean it. Maybe she feels like I'm taking away her beloved brother. What are you talking about? Ken scolded, turning to Linda. My sisters never tried to control my relationships. Linda was taken aback. You don't believe me? I lifted my eyes and glanced at her mockingly. She always thought Ken would side with her unconditionally since he used to do that. Little did she know, the bond between Ken and me as siblings cannot be easily shaken by her. Even if I were guilty, Ken wouldn't do anything to me. I'm no longer the person from a past life who could be easily framed. I can't just listen to one side of the story. What's going on here? Ken asked me, pressing my temples in confusion. I said, this classmate suddenly ran up to me and declared, I won't let Ken's inheritance fall into your hands. She yelled my name, deliberately fell down the stairs and made a scene. Fancy framing someone? Let her get a taste of her own medicine, I remarked. The guests buzzed with conversation upon hearing me. What a foolish girl, trying to set Lucy up like that. Foolish? She's cunning. Look at how greedy she is for other people's money. She must be with Ken just for the money. Ken recalled the conversation he had with Linda earlier, his expression turning slightly grim. Obviously, he believed what I said. Linda's mind went blank for a moment before she widened her eyes and shouted angrily, I never said that. Sister, don't accuse me falsely. Her misty eyes looked at Ken, as if she was extremely wronged. Ken, I'm telling the truth. You believe me, right? Seeing her like that made Ken hesitate, his heart wavering toward her. I smirked, Miss Gu. There's surveillance footage at the staircase. It will clearly show who pushed whom. There's surveillance. Now genuinely panicking, Linda's grip tightened on Ken's shirt, knuckles turning white. Even as slow as Ken could sometimes be, her reaction made things clear for him. His face filled with disappointment as he pushed her away. Linda, I'm so disappointed in you. I thought you were different from other girls. It's not like that. Let me explain. I just didn't want you to suffer. Watching his figure leave, Linda shouted in desperation. Ken never looked back. Linda turned to me resentful. Why did you frame me? Calmly, I replied. That's a question for you to answer. The guests around began to voice their support for me. How can she still have the audacity to question Lucy when she's the one who tried to frame someone? Today was an eye-opener. I've seen people with thick skin, but never like hers. She probably did similar stuff before. This time she's caught in her own trap. Serves her right. Hearing these voices, Linda's face turned blue and white. No longer having the courage to face me, she limped away through the crowd, looking like a drowned rat. As the actress exited the scene, the guests offered some comfort before dispersing. I headed back upstairs, only to see David rushing down with an excited, twisted expression on his scarred face. I asked the maid following him, what did he do upstairs? Apologetically, she lowered her head. I'm sorry, miss. I couldn't keep an eye on him. The lady of the house called me to entertain guests, and after finishing, I found him on the second floor. I don't know what he did. I waved her off. It's fine, you can go back to work. 3 days later, David came by again. Our entire family was having dinner at the time. My parents turned away in disgust at the sight of his face. What are you here for? Don't send me away. I have something important to tell you. David handed my parents a document. Take a look at this first. Reluctantly, my parents opened it, and their expressions changed drastically upon seeing the contents. There's no way you're our child. Ken glanced at the papers and snorted. David, you think my parents are stupid enough to believe this? You're really malicious, trying to take my parents away just because I took someone you love. David gave them a paternity test result. It clearly showed he was related to my parents, while Ken was not. I then realized that David had gone to my parents' room that day to swipe their hair for a secret paternity test. Facing doubts, David calmly pulled out his childhood photos along with ones of John when he was younger. My parents' hands shook as they looked at the pictures. Little David looked exactly like my father. John's youthful features bore a resemblance to current Ken. Given the test results, it was hard not to ponder. These photos have to be fake, Ken said, taking a step back, shouting they have to be edited. Parents, you can't be fooled by him. My dad, in a calm manner, said I will uncover the truth. Looking at David, his demeanor softened slightly. Give me some of your hair, and we'll have the driver take you home. Do you really believe David because of some papers and photos? Ken asked, feeling hurt. I'm so disappointed in you. He felt betrayed, overwhelmed by fear he didn't understand, and stormed upstairs, slamming his door. Ken never came downstairs for dinner that night. His doting mother, for the first time, didn't go to check on him. The next day, Ken returned from school all beaten up. I frowned. Who did this to you? Ken replied, upset. They all did. A bunch of opportunists. Rumors are going around that I might not be my parents' son. So they all turned against me. There were too many of them. I couldn't fight back. His tone was filled with anger. Just a bunch of opportunists. I've been way too nice to them. This was expected. Ken had always strutted around school, considering himself untouchable. But with rumors labeling him the son of a murderer, those who resented him, or suffered under him, were ready to strike back. Once Ken started talking, he couldn't stop. Linda is with David now too. She mocked me, called me a worthless parasite. She never loved me, just stayed for my money. He lowered his voice and said, even my parents. Yesterday I overheard them in the study saying David must be their real son. I'm so dumb, completely unlike them. They seem happy, especially since David's so accomplished. They even said, when the DNA results come, they'll have something to show me. David's been through hell, so I deserve some hardship too. Sis, I'm doomed. He gritted his teeth, but I could see he was unwilling to accept it. There was a fire burning in his eyes, like it just needed a spark to explode. I looked down, hiding the worry in my eyes. Our parents are just fooled by David. When the DNA test comes back, those people will be shut. But what if, just what if, Ken looked at me seriously, I'm not really their son. Ken, I looked back at him earnestly, you'll always be my brother. Even if your fears come true, and our parents turn their backs on you, I'll take care of you. Really? Ken seemed unsure, weighing something. Can I really trust you? I asked, when have I ever lied to you? Ken moved his lips but said nothing. Ken seemed relaxed, but it only lasted until before dinner. He stumbled upon David and Linda in the living room. My parents seemed convinced David was their real son, invited him for dinner, and he brought Linda along. Ken's mind went blank seeing them. He clenched his teeth and asked, why are you guys here? Your parents invited me for dinner. I brought Linda along. David smiled slightly. What do you know? Your parents think I'm the son they lost. Linda chimed in, not think. You are the rightful heir of this family. As for Ken, she sneered, without this family, you're a nobody, a complete loser. Dating someone like him is the biggest regret of my life. Ken's forehead veins popped, fists clenched. You shut your mouth. Linda flinched a bit. David shielded Linda. Don't be afraid, Linda. The one who should be scared is him. He glared at Ken, eyes full of malice. Ken, your family has wronged me so badly, I won't let you off. Neither will my parents. The day the DNA results arrive, your good days are over. All the suffering I went through, you'll get back 1,000 times over. Rage and fear consumed Ken. He threw himself at David. At that moment, our parents and I were discussing things in the study. They decided David was more capable, preferred to hand the family business to him. I should just focus on my studies. No need to learn the business. I saw this coming the moment David showed up. To them, sons always mattered more than daughters. I stayed composed and said all right. When we heard the scuffle downstairs, we rushed down. We found the two fighting, and my parents quickly separated them. Does it hurt? My mom worriedly fussed over the cut on David's lip. Auntie, get the first aid kit. Mom. Ken called out, look at me. I'm hurt worse than David. My mom scoffed, serves you right. David's a good kid. You must have provoked him. My dad agreed, troublemaker. No idea who you take after. Their disdain for Ken was blatant and poured out. You. Pain, fear, and hate twisted on Ken's face. Ultimately, a flame burned in his eyes. In the end, he yelled, you'll regret this, then stormed out. Ken. I wanted to go after him, but my dad held me back. No need to spoil him. My parents then joyfully invited David and Linda to dinner, not caring where Ken went. Over dinner, they planned to pick up the DNA results together tomorrow. I said, I've got class in the morning, so I won't join. My mom nodded, not forcing me. It was clear her focus was entirely on David. I texted my bodyguard, telling him to keep an eye on Ken. Since David came with the DNA report yesterday, I've had him follow Ken. I could feel Ken's anger at our parents' change and his fear. Fear can lead people to avoid or act out. Ken was clearly the latter. After dinner, I went to the restroom. When I came out, David and Linda blocked my path. "Sis, don't you hate me?" I showed up. "And now our parents want me to run the family business." David spoke first. Not waiting for my response, "I hate you too. Back when I was 10, if you hadn't tripped, my parents would have caught me. I'm so like my dad, he would have known I was his real son." I was surprised he remembered things from 7 or 8 years ago, even the details. "If not for you, I wouldn't have suffered so much." David gestured to his face. "Back then, you told Becky to discipline me, lest I make mistakes and get in trouble with my parents. Soon after, Becky poured hot oil on my face, ruining it. Even standing before my parents, they didn't recognize me." He continued, "I think you knew from the start I was your switched brother. But you wanted my parents' inheritance for yourself, since they wouldn't leave it to Ken, a fool." Seeing that I was still unmoved, David almost overflowed with resentment in his voice. "Didn't expect that, did you? Even the universe couldn't stand it, and let me learn the truth about my origins. And now I'm back. Don't worry," he continued. "I'll pay you back 1,000-fold for the suffering you've caused me." I clapped my hands. "You're so good at detective work. Why not become a mystery writer instead? You blame me for falling, but why not blame the person who switched you at birth? Better yet, why not blame yourself for stealing Ken's stuff and running off in the first place? If you ask me, all the suffering you've gone through is karma. It's funny. In a past life, he never appreciated my help. Now that I'm a bystander, he blames me again. How pathetic." "You," David snarled, his forehead veins bulging. "You just keep running that mouth. Wait until I inherit everything. Then you'll see." He walked off quickly, probably afraid I might say something to rile him up even more. Linda lagged a few steps behind him. She whispered to me, "Lucy, you embarrassed me so much last time. When I become David's wife, I won't let you off easy." Once they were gone, I shifted my gaze and texted Ken, "It's dangerous out there. Come home early. No matter what the DNA test says tomorrow, you're still my brother." A few seconds later, Ken called me. He was silent for a while on the other end before saying, "Sis, don't go with them to pick up the DNA test results tomorrow." Then he hung up. I looked at my now dark phone screen, lost in thought. As usual, I went to my university classes early. During class, I received a call from the police. My parents and David had an accident. On the way to pick up the DNA test report, Becky drove a large truck and crashed into them directly. My parents died on the spot, and both David and Linda were severely injured, currently in the hospital fighting for their lives. The police arrested Becky immediately. She admitted to falling asleep at the wheel and accidentally crashing into them, saying she'd face the legal consequences. No, it was for Ken. I told the police everything about the recent entanglements between our families. The rest was up to them. The police's in-depth investigation revealed frequent interactions between Becky and Ken in the past few days. They recovered deleted chat logs, uncovering the truth. Becky and Ken had planned the accident together. When David confronted us with the DNA results that night, Ken went to Becky, asking her to verify the truth. Ken, not wanting to give up a life of wealth, asked Becky to help deal with my family. She hesitated until she saw Ken show up at her place the next day covered in bruises. She finally decided to help him. That's how the crash happened. Eventually, the police caught Ken in the hospital. Upon learning that David and Linda weren't dead, Ken, under the guise of visiting them, secretly injected poison into their IVs. Linda died from it. David survived thanks to timely intervention. After Ken went to prison, I visited him once. He broke down, asking, "Sis, even though I had mom and dad killed, it indirectly left you with the inheritance. Why'd you let the police catch me? I never meant to hurt you. I even warned you not to go out with them that day." "Really?" I stared at him calmly. "If I hadn't texted you that day, would you have called to warn me?" "No, you wouldn't have. If I had died, you would inherit everything. No one would know you're not really my parents' child." Ken fell silent. Initially, Ken's plan was to eliminate anyone who knew the truth. But I repeatedly assured him that I'd stand by him, regardless of whether he was biologically related to my parents. This led him to change his mind. Deep down, Ken was just as selfish as my biological brother. After a while, Ken suddenly began sobbing. "Sis, I know I've done wrong. You're the best to me. Can you get me a good lawyer? Help me avoid the death penalty?" He covered his face, crying miserably. But I remembered how he was in our past life, so arrogant, verbally abusing me for Linda's sake, and even hiring thugs to threaten me. That was a long nightmare. Now watching him squirm like an insect stuck in quicksand, unable to get out, I realized that nightmare is finally coming to an end. I stood up, my voice cold. "You should have been in jail a long time ago. Spend your next life repenting there." Ken was stunned. "What do you mean by that?" I didn't answer, just turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard Ken's venomous curses. "Lucy, I should have gone through with it. I should have killed you. You put Dad in jail and ruined my life." Ack! He erupted in impotent rage, smashing against the glass wall until the guards restrained him. Even if Ken hadn't shown mercy, I'd still be alive. I'd always had bodyguards watching him. I knew exactly what he was up to. I even nudged things along. The news that Ken wasn't my father's son was something I anonymously posted on the school's forum. I invited David and Linda over for dinner with my parents. Getting beaten up at school and treated poorly at home were all straws that broke his back and pushed him to the extreme. Finally, I achieved my goal. Those who hurt or even killed me in a past life all faced a miserable end. 6 months later, David finally woke up from his coma. But he was a shell of his former self, paralyzed from the neck down, destined to spend his days in a hospital bed. The first thing he did when he woke up was demand to see me. When I arrived, he angrily confronted me. "Lucy, I had a dream. In it, you stopped John from switching me at birth. I was the eldest son, surrounded by love, living a life of ease. My gut tells me this is how my life should have been. Why didn't you put me back? And why did you let me end up like this?" He actually dreamt about his past life. "Because you said you didn't appreciate me saving you. A person as excellent as you would do well even if you were adopted by a family of killers." I laughed and said, "I've granted your wish. You should be grateful to me." "Grateful to you? Do I even know what kind of life I'm living? Getting beat up by Becky, being disfigured by her, and constantly going hungry." He accused Becky of the various wrongs she had done to him. I was indifferent. "Oh, then you just weren't good enough." With anger, David's face turned red. "Lucy, you did this on purpose. You deliberately didn't save me." "Yeah, I did it on purpose. Am I some kind of saint? Thanks to you, my past life was so miserable. And in the end you killed me. Do I have to be grateful to you?" I curled my lips into a mocking grin. "The last thing you said to me in the past life was that I was an ugly freak, deserved to be disfigured. Your actions matched the suffering you endured, and now I've given it back to you. You can just rot away here in this hospital bed." After that, David went insane, constantly saying this isn't how it should be and repeatedly trying to end it all, claiming he wanted to be reborn and change his fate. Unfortunately, he's a useless cripple from the neck down, so he can't even manage to die. I just had him sent to a mental hospital. I'm not going to let him die. For someone like him, living is a punishment. After seeing David, I gradually stopped having nightmares about my past life. I guess it's because I know those people from the past can never hurt me again. Since being reborn, the gloom hovering over me has completely vanished. I've finally started a new life. From now on, my life will be smooth sailing. The end.